The blood-red sunset painted Felicity Zimmerman's tear-stained face as she stared at the freshly dug grave, mourning the mother whose passing had left her at the mercy of a stepfather who despised her very existence. At 19 years old, with nothing but the clothes on her back and her mother's silver locket around her neck, she knew that tomorrow in Eureka Springs, Arkansas would bring nothing but more misery under Thomas Bradley's cruel reign over what had once been her home. "Your mama might have thought you worth keeping, girl, but I ain't never seen the use in you," Thomas slurred, whiskey bottle dangling from his calloused fingers as they walked back from the cemetery in 1876. "Now she's gone, you best earn your keep or find yourself somewhere else to lay your head." Felicity kept her eyes fixed on the dirt path leading back to town, her mother's final words echoing in her mind. "Stay strong, my sweet girl. Your worth isn't measured by what others see, but by what lies within your heart." The afternoon heat pressed down on her black morning dress as Eureka Springs buildings came into view, the burgeoning spa town bustling with visitors seeking healing from its famed mineral springs. "Did you hear me, girl?" Thomas growled, grabbing her arm and spinning her to face him. His breath reeked of cheap whiskey and tobacco. "I ain't feeding no useless mouth. Your mama ain't here to protect you now." "I heard you," Felicity replied softly, pulling her arm from his grasp. "I'll find work tomorrow, see that you do." He stumbled slightly, catching himself against a fence post. "And don't be getting ideas about touching your mama's things. Everything in that house belongs to me now." Felicity bit her tongue, knowing argument would only fuel his rage. At the small clapboard house that had once been filled with her mother's laughter, she slipped into the kitchen to prepare their evening meal, her hands trembling as she stoked the fire. For 3 years, she had watched her mother wither under Thomas Bradley's cruel temperament after he'd charmed his way into their lives, promising security after Felicity's father had died in a mining accident. Now, with her mother gone, the mask of civility had dropped completely. That night, as Thomas snored drunkenly in the bedroom he had shared with her mother, Felicity lay awake on her thin mattress in the corner of the kitchen, planning her future. Come morning, she would find work any work and save every penny until she could escape Eureka Springs and the man who reminded her daily of her supposed worthlessness. Dawn had barely broken when Felicity slipped out of the house, her simple blue dress the only respectable clothing she owned besides her morning gown. The town was beginning to stir as she made her way toward Main Street, where shops were opening and hotel staff prepared for the day's guests. She tried the general store first, where Mr. Peterson shook his head apologetically. "Wish I could help you, Miss Zimmerman, but business is slow, can't afford another clerk." The dressmaker, the hotel, and the bakery all gave similar responses. By midday, with the Arkansas sun beating down mercilessly, Felicity found herself outside the Silver Dollar Saloon, hesitating before the swinging doors. Working in a saloon was barely a step above disreputable, but desperation drove her forward. Inside, the smell of stale beer and cigar smoke assaulted her senses. A few early patrons nursed drinks at scattered tables while a piano player half-heartedly tapped out a tune. "Help you, miss." The bartender eyed her suspiciously, pausing in his task of wiping down the bar. "I'm looking for work," Felicity said, lifting her chin despite the fear knotting her stomach. "Any position available." The bartender's eyes traveled over her slender frame, lingering in ways that made her skin crawl. "Might be, boss is in the back, name's Hargrove." In a small office behind the bar, Milton Hargrove, a corpulent man with oily hair and beady eyes, made her an offer that turned her stomach. "Pretty girl like you would make good money serving drinks and keeping the customers happy." The implication hung heavy in the air. Felicity backed toward the door. "I'm seeking respectable employment, sir." Hargrove laughed, the sound like gravel. "Respectability don't put food in your belly, girl. Think it over." Felicity fled the saloon, heart pounding. Outside, she collided with a solid wall of a man stumbling backward. Strong hands steadied her. "Whoa there, miss. You all right?" She looked up into the most startling blue eyes she'd ever seen, set in a sun-bronzed face beneath a well-worn Stetson. The stranger's expression shifted from surprise to concern as he took in her distress. "I'm fine," Felicity managed, stepping back from his grasp. "Excuse me." "Hold on now," he said, his voice deep with a hint of Texas in its cadence. "You don't look fine to me, someone bothering you in there." Felicity shook her head, unwilling to share her troubles with a stranger, no matter how kind his eyes. "No, sir, just disappointment." The man studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the cafe across the street. "Might be you could use a cup of coffee and something to eat." "I was heading there myself," her pride warred with her empty stomach. "I couldn't impose." "No imposition," he said, tipping his hat. "Franklin Cooper, most folks call me Frank." "Felicity Zimmerman," she replied hesitantly. "Well, Miss Zimmerman, I'm new in town and could use some local company over lunch. Consider it a favor to a lonely traveler." Something in his straightforward manner put her at ease, and the prospect of food was too tempting to refuse. "Very well, Mr. Cooper, thank you." At the cafe, Frank ordered coffee and hearty meals for them both. He didn't pry as Felicity ate with careful restraint despite her hunger, but his perceptive gaze noted the worn edges of her dress and the tension in her shoulders. Passing through or staying in Eureka Springs? He asked conversationally. Felicity cupped her coffee mug, drawing warmth from it. "I've lived here all my life." "Beautiful country," Frank observed. "I'm here on business, might be staying a while if things work out." "What business brings you to our town, if I may ask?" Frank leaned back in his chair, his manner relaxed but attentive. "Horses. I raise and train them at my ranch in Texas. Came to look at some stock and heard there might be opportunity here with the growing tourism." The mention of horses brought a genuine smile to Felicity's face. "My father kept horses before he passed. I used to help with them." "Did you now?" Frank's interest seemed to sharpen. "Comfortable around them then?" "Very. They were my friends growing up." Frank nodded thoughtfully. "As it happens, I'm looking to hire someone local to help with the horses I've brought and the others I plan to acquire. Need someone who understands them, can help with basic care while I'm setting up business arrangements." Felicity felt a flicker of hope. "Are you offering me employment, Mr. Cooper?" "If you're interested," he replied. "Pays fair, works honest. I've got a small property just outside town I'm leasing, room and board included." It seemed too perfect, almost suspiciously so. "Why would you offer such a position to a complete stranger?" Frank smiled, the expression transforming his rugged features. "I'm a decent judge of character, Miss Zimmerman, and good help with horses is hard to find." He paused. "Plus, you look like someone who could use a fresh start." Felicity hesitated, wary of charity yet desperate for escape. "I couldn't live on your property, Mr. Cooper. It wouldn't be proper." "There's a small cabin separate from the main house," Frank explained, "previously used by the caretaker, and Mrs. Hollies comes daily to cook and clean. Your reputation would be safe." The opportunity seemed heaven-sent, yet Felicity couldn't help but wonder at the stranger's motives. "May I see the property before deciding?" "Of course." Frank checked his pocket watch. "My wagon's outside. We could ride out now if you're amenable." An hour later, Felicity stood in a cozy one-room cabin on Frank Cooper's leased property, 3 miles outside Eureka Springs. The main house was visible across a small meadow, and 4 beautiful horses grazed in a fenced pasture nearby. The cabin was simple but clean, with a bed, table, chairs, and a small stove. "It's not fancy," Frank said, standing respectfully at the door while she inspected the space, "but it's solid and dry." "It's lovely," Felicity admitted, after touring the stables and meeting Mrs. Hollies, a matronly woman who had immediately taken to Felicity. Her suspicions had begun to ease. Frank Cooper seemed genuinely in need of help with his horses, and his manner had remained unfailingly respectful. "When would you need me to start?" she asked. "Tomorrow would be fine," Frank replied. "Give you time to gather your things." Felicity's expression clouded. "I don't have much to gather." Frank studied her for a moment. "Trouble at home," she hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "My mother recently passed, my stepfather. He's not a kind man. He's made it clear I'm unwelcome unless I contribute financially." Frank's jaw tightened slightly. "I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Zimmerman, and for your circumstances." He paused. "If you prefer, you could stay here tonight, Mrs. Hollies will remain until evening, and I'll be in the main house if you need anything." The thought of returning to Thomas Bradley's house filled Felicity with dread. That's very kind, but I should collect my clothing and my mother's locket. I won't leave it behind. I'll drive you back to town and wait while you gather your belongings, Frank offered. No sense in you making the journey twice. Thomas was mercifully absent when they arrived at the small house. Felicity quickly packed her few possessions into a carpet bag, including her mother's cherished family Bible and the silver locket. She paused to write a brief note explaining she had found employment and lodging elsewhere. As she closed the door behind her, Felicity felt a weight lifting. Whatever the future held at Frank Cooper's ranch, it had to be better than the life she was leaving behind. The first week on the Cooper property passed in a blur of activity. Felicity rose at dawn each day to feed and water the horses, clean stalls, and assist Frank with exercise and basic training. Her knowledge of horses, while not professional, proved adequate, and her willingness to learn impressed her new employer. Frank Cooper was unlike any man she had known, patient with both horses and humans, respectful of her opinions, and possessed of a quiet strength that never veered into domination or cruelty. In the evenings, they often shared meals on the porch of the main house, Frank telling stories of his ranch in Texas and his travels across the frontier. "Why Eureka Springs?" Felicity asked one evening as they watched the sunset paint the Ozark Mountains in gold and crimson. "Texas has plenty of visitors seeking horses, I would imagine." Frank's expression turned contemplative. "My younger sister came here last year for the healing waters, consumption. She wrote about how beautiful it was, how peaceful." He paused, gazing at the horizon. "She passed before I could visit her. Thought maybe I'd understand her better if I saw the place she loved at the end." Felicity's heart ached for him. "I'm sorry about your sister." "Thank you." Frank offered a small smile. "Grief has a way of changing your path." "I wasn't planning to stay, but something about this place. It feels right, at least for now." By the second week, Felicity had settled into a comfortable routine. Mrs. Hollies had become a motherly presence, teaching her to cook Frank's favorite meals and sharing gossip from town. 4 more horses had arrived, keeping Felicity busy with their care. One afternoon, as she brushed a spirited chestnut mare, the sound of an approaching wagon drew her attention. Her blood ran cold as she recognized Thomas Bradley's voice, slurring and belligerent. "Where is she? Where's that worthless girl hiding?" Felicity set down the brush and stepped from the stall, steeling herself as she walked toward the yard where Thomas was confronting Frank. "Mr. Bradley," Frank said calmly, "Miss Zimmerman is employed here legally. She's an adult free to make her own decisions." Thomas swayed slightly, pointing an accusatory finger. "She's my responsibility, left without so much as asking permission. Took things that weren't hers." Felicity approached, her heart pounding. "I left a note, and I took only what belonged to me, my clothes and my mother's locket." Thomas's bloodshot eyes fixed on her with malice. "You'll come back now, girl. I won't have folks saying I can't control my own household." "I'm staying here," Felicity replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I have honest work and fair pay." "Fair pay," Thomas sneered, looking Frank up and down. "I know what kind of work pretty girls do for men living alone. You're disgracing your mother's memory." Frank stepped between them, his posture relaxed but unmistakably protective. "That's enough, Bradley. Miss Zimmerman works with my horses. Her reputation is intact, and Mrs. Hollies can vouch for the propriety of the arrangement." Thomas lunged forward, grabbing for Felicity's arm, but Frank moved with surprising speed, catching the older man's wrist before he could touch her. "I wouldn't," Frank said quietly, a dangerous edge to his voice. Thomas yanked his arm free, stumbling back. "This ain't over," he spat. "That locket was your mother's wedding gift from me. It's mine by rights." "It was my father's gift to her," Felicity corrected, hand going protectively to the silver pendant beneath her collar. "You never gave her anything but grief." With a string of curses, Thomas climbed back onto his wagon and whipped the horses into motion, nearly colliding with a fence post as he turned to leave. "Are you all right?" Frank asked once Thomas was out of sight. Felicity nodded, though she trembled slightly. "He'll be back when he's more sober. He can't stand the thought of me finding happiness without him." Frank's expression darkened. "Has he hurt you before?" "Not physically," Felicity answered, avoiding his gaze. "His weapons were words. According to Thomas, I'm useless, worthless, a burden." He made sure I knew it daily after my mother fell ill. Words leave deeper scars than fists sometimes, Frank observed quietly. Then, with gentle firmness, "He's wrong about you, Felicity. I've never met anyone who works harder or has a better way with horses. You have value beyond measure." His words wrapped around her like a warm blanket, and for the first time in years, Felicity felt truly seen. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a recognition, a possibility neither was ready to name. The moment broke when Mrs. Hollies called them for supper, but the memory of Frank's words stayed with Felicity long into the night. True to her prediction, Thomas returned 3 days later, stone-cold sober and accompanied by Sheriff Mills. "Miss Zimmerman," the sheriff said, removing his hat as Felicity met them in the yard. "Your stepfather has filed a complaint about stolen property, says you took a silver locket that belongs to him." Before Felicity could respond, Frank emerged from the stables. "Sheriff," he greeted with a respectful nod. Sheriff Mills acknowledged him. "Mr. Cooper, just looking to resolve a family dispute without trouble." "There's no dispute," Felicity said firmly. "The locket was my father's gift to my mother before I was born. My mother always intended me to have it." Thomas stepped forward, his manner controlled but eyes cold. "There's no proof of that. As her husband, all Elizabeth's possessions legally passed to me upon her death." The sheriff looked uncomfortable. "That is the law, Miss Zimmerman." "May I see this locket?" Frank asked. With reluctance, Felicity removed the silver pendant from around her neck and handed it to Frank, who examined it carefully before passing it to the sheriff. "Notice the engraving inside," Frank directed. "To Elizabeth, all my love, James, 1856. The sheriff opened the locket and read the inscription, then looked at Thomas. "That would be her first husband's name," Thomas flushed. "Doesn't matter. We were married when she died. Her property is mine." "A gift given before your marriage, clearly intended for her daughter," Frank countered. "Any judge would consider that Felicity's rightful inheritance." The sheriff handed the locket back to Felicity. "Mr. Bradley, I'm inclined to let the girl keep her mother's memento. Unless you want to take this to Judge Wilson, but he's not likely to side with you over something so personal to the young lady." Thomas's face contorted with rage. "Fine, keep the worthless trinket, but don't come crawling back when this cowboy gets tired of you, girl. You're dead to me now." As Thomas stormed back to his wagon, the sheriff lingered, lowering his voice. "Miss Zimmerman, your employment here is respectable entirely," Frank answered for her. "Mrs. Hollies supervises, and Miss Zimmerman has her own cabin. Her reputation is secure." Sheriff Mills nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good. Bradley's been hitting the bottle hard since your mother passed. Might be best if you keep your distance for a while." After the sheriff departed, Felicity clutched the locket, tears threatening. "Thank you for defending me." Frank's expression was gentle. "No one should be made to feel worthless, Felicity, especially not by family." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk, Felicity asked the question that had been lingering since Frank had come to her defense. "Why did you stand up for me? You barely know me." Frank was quiet for a long moment. "My sister, the one who died her husband, was like your stepfather, made her believe she was nothing without him. By the time I realized what was happening, she was too sick to leave him." His voice roughened. "I promised myself I'd never stand by while someone was being diminished like that again." Felicity absorbed this, understanding Frank better now. "Your sister was fortunate to have a brother who loved her so." "Not fortunate enough," he said softly. Then, changing the subject, "What do you think of that Palomino filly? She seems to have taken a shine to you." As summer progressed into early autumn, Felicity's confidence grew alongside her skills with the horses. Frank's business was thriving. Wealthy visitors to Eureka Springs, Healing Springs, often sought quality mounts for exploring the beautiful Ozark countryside, and his reputation for well-trained, reliable horses spread quickly. The Palomino filly, which Frank had named Sunny, had indeed become Felicity's special project. The young horse had arrived nervous and skittish, but under Felicity's patient handling, she was blossoming into a steady, trusting mount. "You have a gift," Frank told her one afternoon as they watched Sunny take a saddle without protest for the first time. "The horses sense your genuine care for them." Felicity smiled, warmed by his praise. They're honest creatures. They respond to kindness and consistency. Not unlike people, Frank observed, his eyes lingering on her face. The air between them had been changing subtly over the weeks, charged with an awareness neither had acknowledged directly. Felicity found herself noticing small details. The way sunlight caught the golden highlights in Frank's brown hair, how his smile started in his eyes before reaching his lips, the gentle strength in his hands as he worked with the horses. For his part, Frank seemed to seek her company beyond their working hours, bringing books he thought might interest her, listening attentively to her stories of growing up in Eureka Springs, and sharing more of his own past in Texas. One crisp September evening, as they walked back from town after attending a harvest festival, Frank stopped along the moonlit road. "Felicity," he said, his voice unusually hesitant, "I find myself thinking about you even when you're right beside me." Her heart quickened. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm wondering what you're thinking, hoping you're happy, wishing I could." He paused, seeming to search for words. "I'm not a man who speaks flowery phrases easily, but I believe I'm falling in love with you." Felicity's breath caught. "Frank." "You don't need to say anything," he assured her quickly. "I know your life has been unsettled. The last thing you need is pressure from me. I just wanted you to know that I see you, all of you, and I think you're extraordinary." Moonlight silvered the landscape as Felicity gathered her courage. "My stepfather spent years telling me I was worthless," she said softly. "I started to believe him. Then you came along and offered me not just work, but respect. You made me feel valuable again." "You were always valuable," Frank said, taking her hand gently. "I just had the good fortune to recognize it." Felicity looked up at him, this man who had changed her world with simple kindness and unwavering belief in her. "I think I may be falling in love with you too." Frank's smile was like sunrise. "May I kiss you, Felicity Zimmerman?" She nodded, and when his lips met hers, gentle and reverent, it felt like coming home. Their courtship progressed with the same honest directness that characterized Frank Cooper. He called on Felicity properly at her cabin each evening, often accompanied by Mrs. Hollis as chaperone when they rode into town or attended church together. The people of Eureka Springs soon became accustomed to seeing the handsome horse trader and the once shy daughter of Elizabeth Bradley together. Not everyone approved. Thomas Bradley spread malicious gossip when he could, insinuating impropriety and questioning Felicity's character. But Frank's reputation for fairness in business and Felicity's quiet dignity gradually won over even the most gossip-prone townspeople. In October, Frank received a letter that brought both opportunity and complication. His foreman in Texas had written with news that required his attention at his home ranch. "I need to return to Texas for a few weeks," he told Felicity as they walked along the banks of the spring-fed creek that ran through his property. "Johnson needs decisions about breeding pairs for next season, and there are business matters I can't handle from here." Felicity nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Of course, your ranch needs you." "I'd like you to come with me," Frank said, stopping to face her. "As my wife." Felicity's eyes widened. "Frank," he took both her hands in his. "I know it's sudden, but I've never been more certain of anything. I love you, Felicity. I want to build a life with you here in Texas, wherever our path leads. I want to wake up each morning knowing you'll never doubt your worth again." Tears welled in Felicity's eyes. "Are you certain?" "I have no dowry, no family connections to offer you." Frank cupped her face gently. "The only treasure I want is your heart. Say you'll marry me, Felicity. Say you'll be my partner in all things." "Yes," she whispered, joy bubbling up inside her. "Yes, I'll marry you, Franklin Cooper." They were married 2 weeks later in Eureka Springs' small church, with Mrs. Hollis beaming proudly in the front pew, and several of the townspeople Felicity had known all her life in attendance. Thomas Bradley was noticeably absent, having publicly disowned his stepdaughter when news of her engagement spread. Felicity wore a simple ivory dress that Mrs. Hollis had helped her make, with her mother's locket around her neck and wildflowers in her hair. Frank, handsome in a new suit, watched her walk down the aisle with undisguised adoration. "I, Franklin James Cooper, take thee, Felicity Jane Zimmerman, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he vowed, his voice steady and sure. "I promise to cherish you all the days of my life." to honor your strength and spirit, and to remind you each day of your immeasurable worth. Felicity's heart soared as she made her own vows, sealing their commitment before God and community. The small reception afterward at the town's best hotel was filled with genuine well wishes and celebration. That night, as husband and wife, they discovered each other with tender passion. Frank's reverence for her body matched his respect for her mind and spirit, and Felicity found herself fully embraced heart, soul, and flesh by a man who saw her value in all things. The journey to Frank's Texas ranch took nearly 2 weeks by train and stagecoach. For Felicity, who had never traveled beyond the Ozarks, each day brought new wonders: the vast plains of Indian Territory, the red earth of Texas, and finally the rolling hill country where Frank's ranch spread across 5,000 acres. The main house was larger than Felicity had imagined, a solid 2-story structure of limestone and timber with wide porches and tall windows. A dozen outbuildings, extensive corrals, and pastures dotted with grazing horses completed the picture. "Welcome home, Mrs. Cooper," Frank said as he helped her down from the wagon that had met them at the nearest town. The ranch staff had assembled to greet them: Johnson, the weathered foreman who had written the letter; Maria, the cook who had been with Frank's family for 20 years, and a dozen cowboys and stable hands. Their curious but respectful gazes made Felicity nervous, but Frank's steady hand at her back gave her courage. "Everyone, this is my wife, Felicity," Frank announced proudly. "She has a way with horses that would put most of you to shame, so mind you show her the respect she deserves." The first month on the Texas ranch tested Felicity in ways she hadn't anticipated. Though the staff was respectful, she sensed their uncertainty about this new mistress who had appeared so suddenly in their lives. The house itself, while beautiful, intimidated her with its size and the remnants of Frank's family history evident in every room. "My mother decorated most of it," Frank explained when he found Felicity staring at the formal dining room with its crystal chandelier and heavy furniture. "We can change anything you don't like, make it ours instead of a museum to the past." Gradually, Felicity found her place. She spent mornings with Maria, learning the rhythms of the ranch household and taking over the accounts, which she discovered she had a talent for managing. Afternoons found her in the stables, working with the young horses and earning the grudging respect of Johnson and the other horsemen. "Never seen a lady with such a light hand on the reins," Johnson commented one day after watching Felicity gentling a particularly difficult colt. "Boss chose well when he found you." By Christmas, the ranch was beginning to feel like home. Felicity had redecorated several rooms, adding touches of color and comfort to the formal spaces. Frank had given her free rein, delighting in her growing confidence as mistress of his home. On Christmas Eve, after the ranch hands had enjoyed a feast and retired to their bunkhouse with generous gifts, Frank and Felicity sat before the fire in their bedroom, exchanging private presents. "For my beautiful wife," Frank said, handing her a small velvet box. Inside, Felicity found a delicate gold bracelet set with small emeralds. "Frank, it's exquisite," she breathed, admiring how the stones caught the firelight. "To match your eyes," he said, fastening it around her wrist, though nothing could truly capture their particular shade of green. Felicity handed him her gift, a handsome leather-bound journal with his initials embossed in gold. "For your thoughts and plans," she explained. "You mentioned wanting to record the bloodlines of your best horses." Frank's appreciation was evident in his kiss, which quickly deepened into something more urgent. Later, as they lay entwined in their marriage bed, Felicity shared news she had been saving for this special night. "I have another gift," she whispered against his chest. "One that won't arrive until summer." Frank raised himself on one elbow, searching her face. "Felicity, are you saying?" She nodded, joy spilling over in her smile. "We're going to have a baby." The look of wonder that transformed Frank's features was one Felicity would remember all her life. He gathered her close, his hand spreading protectively over her still flat abdomen. "A child," he murmured in awe. "Our child." The pregnancy brought changes to their routine. Though Felicity remained active in managing the household and overseeing the ranch books, Frank insisted she limit her time with the horses, particularly the more spirited ones. This led to their first serious disagreement as husband and wife. "I'm with child, not made of china," Felicity protested one March afternoon when Frank found her lunging a young stallion. "Women have been working through pregnancy since the beginning of time." "Not my wife, not with my child," Frank retorted, his protective instincts in full force. "Johnson can handle the training. And what would you have me do? Sit in the parlor embroidering baby clothes for 6 months?" Their standoff lasted several tense days until Maria, wise in the ways of marriage as well as cooking, intervened. "Senor Cooper," she said as she served breakfast one morning, "my mother rode horseback until the day before I was born. 7 healthy children she had, working in the fields and with the animals every day." Frank looked startled at her directness, while Felicity hid a smile behind her napkin. "With respect, senor," Maria continued, setting down a plate of biscuits with deliberate care, "the senora grows sad when she cannot be with the horses. Sadness is not good for the baby." Frank's expression softened as he looked at Felicity across the table. "I only want to keep you both safe." "I know," Felicity said gently. "And I promise to be careful, but I need purpose, Frank. The horses give me that." They reached a compromise. Felicity would continue working with the gentler horses and foals, but leave the green-breaking and more dangerous tasks to the ranch hands. She also took on more responsibility for the business side of the ranch, discovering she had a knack for negotiation that complemented Frank's straightforward dealing style. As spring turned to summer and Felicity's belly swelled with their growing child, she found herself thinking often of her mother. Elizabeth had raised Felicity alone for many years after James Zimmerman's death, showing a strength and resilience her daughter now appreciated more fully. "I wish my mother could see me now," she told Frank one evening as they sat on the porch watching a spectacular Texas sunset. "She would have loved you and this place." Frank squeezed her hand. "She would be proud of the woman you've become. Strong, capable, unbroken despite everything your stepfather did to dim your light." Felicity leaned her head against his shoulder. "Sometimes I wonder if Thomas ever truly loved her or if he only saw her as something to possess." "Some men can't recognize the treasure they hold," Frank said thoughtfully. "Your mother deserved better. I'm glad she had you, someone who appreciated her true worth." On a sweltering August night, after 18 hours of labor that tested Felicity's endurance to its limits, their son was born, James Franklin Cooper, named for both their fathers. Frank, who had paced the hallway throughout her ordeal, deaf to Maria's assurances that all was proceeding normally, wept unashamedly when the doctor placed the squalling infant in his arms. "He's perfect," Frank whispered, bringing their son to Felicity's bedside. "Just like his mother." Motherhood brought Felicity a new kind of fulfillment. Little Jamie, as they called him, had his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. By his 3rd month, he was already showing curiosity about the world around him, especially the horses that remained central to his parents' lives. As autumn painted the Texas hills in golds and russets, Frank received a letter that reopened the chapter of their lives in Arkansas. The property he had leased in Eureka Springs was available for purchase, and the owner was offering favorable terms. "The spa business continues to grow," Frank explained as they discussed the opportunity over dinner. "Having a presence there for our horses makes good business sense. We could expand our breeding program, perhaps develop a line specifically suited to the mountain terrain." Felicity considered the proposition. "Would we divide our time between there and here?" "I was thinking we might spend springs and summers in Arkansas, fall and winter here in Texas," Frank suggested. "Jamie would benefit from the cooler Arkansas summers as he grows." The idea of returning to Eureka Springs stirred mixed emotions for Felicity. While the town held painful memories of her life with Thomas Bradley, it was also her birthplace, the setting of her early happy years with her mother, and where she had met Frank. "What about Thomas?" she asked, giving voice to her main concern. Frank's expression hardened slightly. "From what Mrs. Hollis wrote in her last letter, he's drinking heavily and in poor health. But regardless, you're my wife now. He has no power over you." After careful consideration, they decided to move forward with the purchase. By the following spring, with Jamie nearly 9 months old, the Cooper family traveled to Arkansas to establish their second home. Eureka Springs had changed in their absence, more hotels had sprung up around the healing springs, and the town had acquired a new prosperity. The property Frank had purchased included the original house and stables, plus an additional 50 acres of prime grazing land. Their return caused a stir among the townspeople. Felicity, now elegantly dressed as befitted the wife of a successful rancher, with a beautiful child and an obviously adoring husband, was a far cry from the desperate young woman who had fled her stepfather's cruelty. They had been in town only 3 days when Sheriff Mills paid them a visit. "Mrs. Cooper," he said, removing his hat as Felicity welcomed him to their home. "Thought you should know your stepfather took a bad turn. Doctor says he might not last the week." Felicity absorbed this news with complicated emotions. "I see, thank you for telling me." After the sheriff departed, Frank found her in the nursery watching Jamie sleep in his cradle. "You're thinking of going to see him," he said, not a question but an observation. Felicity nodded slowly. "Not for his sake, but for my mother's, and maybe for my own peace." Frank wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Would you like me to come with you?" "No," Felicity decided. "This is something I need to do alone." The next morning, Felicity rode into town in their carriage, dressed simply but elegantly in a green dress that matched her eyes. The house where she had spent so many unhappy years looked smaller and shabbier than she remembered, its paint peeling and garden overgrown. A tired-looking woman answered her knock. Agnes Miller, the widow who had been Thomas's neighbor for years. "He's in there," she said, jerking her head toward the bedroom. "Been keeping an eye on him, bringing soup when he'll take it, not that he deserves the kindness." Thomas Bradley lay in the bed that had once belonged to Felicity's mother, his once robust frame wasted by illness and alcohol. His eyes, yellowed and rheumy, widened in recognition when Felicity entered the room. "Come to watch me die, girl," he rasped. Felicity moved to the bedside, not out of affection but human decency. "I came because it was the right thing to do." Thomas coughed, the sound wet and painful. "Look at you now, fancy clothes, rich husband, thinking you're better than everyone." "I never thought I was better than anyone," Felicity replied evenly. "But I finally learned I wasn't worthless, despite how hard you tried to convince me otherwise." A spasm of something, perhaps regret, though it was hard to tell crossed Thomas's gaunt features. "Your mother spoiled you." "Made you soft." "My mother loved me," Felicity corrected. "Something you never understood." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound Thomas's labored breathing. Finally, he spoke again, his voice weaker. "That cowboy treat you right?" The question surprised Felicity. "Yes." "Frank is a good man. We have a son." Thomas nodded slightly, his eyelids drooping. "Good. Elizabeth would have wanted that for you." It was the closest thing to kindness he had ever expressed toward her. Felicity waited until he had drifted to sleep before leaving, placing a small purse of money on the table for Agnes Miller's continued care. Thomas Bradley died 3 days later. Felicity attended the sparsely populated funeral, standing beside Frank as the simple coffin was lowered into the ground near her mother's grave. "Are you all right?" Frank asked as they walked back to their carriage. Felicity considered the question carefully. "Yes," she answered finally. "I think I am. There's a freedom in forgiveness, even for someone who never asked for it." Frank squeezed her hand. "You're the strongest person I know, Felicity Cooper." The summer in Eureka Springs proved profitable for their horse business and healing for Felicity's spirit. She reconnected with childhood friends, introduced Jamie to the natural beauty of the Ozarks, and worked alongside Frank to establish their breeding program for mountain-suited horses. By August, when they prepared to return to Texas for the fall and winter, they had solid foundations for both their business ventures and their place in the community. The girl who had once been told she was worthless had become a respected businesswoman, a loving mother, and a cherished wife. 5 years passed, bringing prosperity and joy to the Cooper family. They welcomed a daughter, Elizabeth Maria, in their 3rd year of marriage, and continued dividing their time between the Texas ranch and their Eureka Springs property. Both ventures thrived under their joint management, with Felicity developing a particular talent for selecting and breeding horses suited to the different terrains. Jamie, now 5, was showing his father's affinity for horses and his mother's quiet determination. Little Lizzie, at 2, was a spirited child with her mother's green eyes and a will of iron beneath her angelic appearance. On a perfect spring morning in 1882, as wildflowers carpeted the Ozark Hills surrounding their Arkansas home, Felicity sat on the porch watching Frank teach Jamie to ride his own pony, a gentle but spirited Welsh mount that was the boy's pride and joy. "Look, Mama," Jamie called, sitting tall in the saddle as the pony trotted in a perfect circle around his father. "I'm riding like Papa, splendid darling," Felicity called back, adjusting Lizzie on her lap so the toddler could see her brother's accomplishment. Later, as the children napped and the afternoon stretched golden across the meadow, Frank joined Felicity on the porch swing, pulling her against his side with the easy familiarity of deep love. "Do you ever think about how different your life might have been?" he asked, his fingers absently stroking her arm. If we hadn't met that day outside the Silver Dollar, Felicity considered the question, remembering the desperate young woman she had been, motherless, intimidated, believing herself without value. "Sometimes. But then I look at our children, our homes, the life we've built together, and I can't imagine any other path." Frank pressed a kiss to her temple. "When I saw you that day, something told me you were special, worth knowing, worth protecting if you needed it, worth loving most of all." "You saw value in me when I couldn't see it in myself," Felicity said softly. "You helped me discover my own strength." "The strength was always there," Frank corrected gently. "I just reminded you to look for it." As the sun began its descent behind the Ozark Mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Felicity Cooper, once told she was worthless, now secure in the knowledge of her immeasurable value, lifted her face for her husband's kiss, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought this remarkable man into her life. In the years that followed, the Cooper family continued to thrive. Their horse breeding business became renowned throughout the Southwest, with buyers coming from as far as California and Montana to purchase their specially bred stock. Jamie grew into a thoughtful young man with his father's business acumen and his mother's compassion, eventually taking over much of the day-to-day management of their Texas operations. Lizzie, spirited and independent, developed a talent for training even the most difficult horses, combining her father's patience with her mother's intuitive understanding of the animals. The Cooper name became synonymous with quality and integrity in the horse trade. But for all their success, Frank and Felicity valued most the family they had created, a home filled with love, respect, and the unshakable belief in each member's inherent worth. When visitors to either of their properties remarked on their obvious happiness, Felicity would often share the lesson that had shaped her life: that true value comes not from what others see in you, but from what you discover within yourself, and that sometimes it takes someone else's vision to help you recognize your own worth. In Eureka Springs and beyond, the story was often told of the young woman whose stepfather claimed she was worthless, and the cowboy who saw her value and made her his world. It became a testament to the transformative power of love given freely, with open eyes and an open heart, the kind of love that doesn't seek to possess but to elevate, not to control but to set free. And in that freedom, Felicity Cooper found her greatest joy.